Hello everyone, and welcome to the October edition of the Farmers Supply Association Agriculture Report. I'm Randy Klepechka, agronomist with Farmers Supply Association. Well, I want to give you a harvest update this month. You remember last month in September, harvest had started, but when I started my program, I said, well, harvest has started, but it hasn't been the start we wanted, because at that time we just had Hurricane Laura come through, and a lot of rain, anywhere from 5 to 10 to 11 inches of rain, a lot of wind. Luckily, not as much wind as we had feared, but we still had quite a bit of wind, and everybody was worried about harvest being off to a bad start. Well, things have changed a whole lot since that time, and now we're in October. We're taping on October the 9th, and things are looking a lot better. We had a really good month over the last month to get harvesting done. Really, one 3-day window, September 22nd through 24th, we had quite a bit of rain come through, but before that and after that, a lot of good harvest weather. So, we're moving along very well right now. Just like to update everyone by crop on what's going on with harvest. First, rice harvest. We're about 80% done on rice harvest right now, so we're making good progress on that. Looking at yields, they're really variable across the board, and later in the program I'll talk about some reasons why I think they are across the board, and maybe some things we can do in the future to maybe even that out and avoid some of the up and downness that we've seen this year. Corn, we're in a cornfield right now near Tuckerman, and so corn harvest is still going on. There's a lot of corn been harvested, but still quite a bit in the field to go. So, but the corn yields have been good. Not necessarily a lot of just bin busting yields, but very good yields, and I think it's a very good corn crop, and again, we're still harvesting that. Soybeans, and of course soybean progress is a whole lot more variable. We've got guys that haven't even thought about harvesting soybeans yet, still working on corn and rice, so haven't even thought about soybeans, and a lot of their soybeans are still green. But on the other side, we've got some guys that are done with soybean harvest already. They're done with everything, completed harvest, so that's kind of what we're seeing with soybeans. Good yields is what I've heard so far, and a lot of the yields I've heard have been with people that are entering growing beans for the soybean yield contest, the Arkansas soybean yield contest. So we're seeing some really good yields with these. Of course, we're seeing some guys that are putting a few extra inputs a lot of times into these and putting them on their best ground. But with that being said, I've heard some yields in the 70s, 80s, and even 90s in some of these contest fields. So I think we've got a good crop out there. Overall the crop won't be that good, but it's still a good crop, I think. Again, I mentioned with rice, what we're seeing with rice is just a lot of variability. Usually after about 10-20% of the rice crop is harvested, I've really got a good idea of it, whether it's an average crop, above average crop, below average crop. But this year it's really been across the board. A lot of good yields, but then we just drop off in certain fields and have some really disappointing yields. So that's kind of what I want to talk about right now. We're seeing these disappointing yields in certain fields. Now, we've got a lot of good rice out there. It's still a good rice crop, but again, the erratic nature of these yields are something that we're seeing a lot of and hearing a lot this year. So just want to talk about maybe some of the reasons we're seeing that, some of the things we can do in the future maybe to help kind of even that out a little bit and not have quite the up and downs that we're seeing this year. I think there's some things that we can do management-wise to help with this. Of course, the first thing we think about a lot of times when we have these erratic yields, and it's probably one of the main causes of it, is certain weather conditions. And there's not a thing in the world we can do about the weather, obviously. So, we can't do anything about that. We're just going to have to work around that. But that is the cause of some of it. A couple of things going on there. When rice is pollinating, we don't want big thunderstorms to come through, and occasionally we probably had a few of those this year. It wasn't a lot of those, but I think we had some thunderstorms here and there with heavy rain and wind during pollination that probably affected grain field and pollination, and have hurt yields in some of those fields. Also, hot temperatures at the wrong time, hot temperatures during that pollination period all the way through grain field can affect things. We didn't have a lot of hot weather this year, but we had some periods now and then that may have affected yields. So again, weather is something that we saw that probably caused some of this erratic nature, and again, not a thing we can do about that. But there are a few management things that we can do to probably alleviate some of this erratic nature of it, and I just want to talk about a few of those. One is varieties. And typically every year I always say that that it seems like the most consistent varieties are those hybrids and also the medium grains. And to an extent, that is the case again this year, but I've heard some hybrid yields that have been kind of disappointing in comparison to, to what we normally see, and also some Jupiter yields that have been a little disappointing. So again, I think the hybrids and the medium grains are still more consistent, but they haven't been totally consistent this year. So, that's where we need to be leaning for, I think, as far as consistency, or those varieties or the hybrids and the medium grains, but that's not the answer to everything. And again, this is not to talk bad about any of the clear fields or the the conventional varieties. They have great yield potential as well. It just seems like they're not quite as consistent, and that's the case again this year. And so again, variety wise, I think as far as consistency, the hybrids and the medium grains, but again, don't forget these other varieties, because they can really perform well as well. Planting dates, we always say the early planting dates are where we need to be, and that's generally the case. I think we avoid some risk with the early planting dates, but that's not the total answer to everything, as well. This year, looking at the planting date study down at Stuttgart, the March 27th rice cut very good. The April 21st rice cut very good. In between there, around April 6th, the yields dropped off quite a bit. So it must have been a weather event during pollination and grain field that caused those to drop off. So that's a concern right there. So again, I think early planting dates eliminate some of that risk, but they're not the total answer. But again, I think we need to be leaning towards early planting always. Potash fertilizer. I think potash fertilizer is very, very important for our farmers. It helps with disease resistance. It just seems like it helps with yield, so I think we've got to make sure we've got those potash levels up high. A lot of times we've got guys maybe going 60 units out there in their pre-plant potash, and I think most of the time we need at least 90 out there. I mean, we need a soil sample to see where you're at, but make sure you've got adequate potash out there, or I think your yields will suffer. And some varieties seem to be more troublesome with that than others. So keep those potash rates up there high, keep your levels in the soil high, and I think that'll help you overcome some of this erratic nature of the yields. Also, early nitrogen can be a factor as well. Some of these varieties that we grow, the early nitrogen is really critical that it be timely, and sometimes we miss out on that timing. So we've got to make sure that we have that early nitrogen timed well. I think, I harp on this every year. I think guys need to be running the DD50. It'll tell you when the last date to get that nitrogen out there early and get it incorporated with the flood before that those yields start dropping off. And once those yields start dropping off, that drop is pretty steep. So we need to make sure we've got our nitrogen out there in a timely manner. Run you a DD50. I mean, it's on the phone now. It's easy to do. We're doing a lot of other things on our phones that are a lot less, useful than that. So I think if guys would be running their DD50s, just again, you can run that on your phone, have it right there with you. That way you know when that date you need to have that nitrogen incorporated by. And again, certain varieties are more sensitive than others, but I think it's very critical that we know that date and we have that, not only have that fertilizer out there, but incorporated by floodwater. And I think if we do that, that's going to eliminate a little inconsistency there. Also, fungicides. Most of our guys are using fungicides right now, but we're seeing some little nibbling diseases like narrow brown leaf spot that I think are affecting yields. The smuts, fall smut doesn't affect yield that much, but kernel smut does. So I think we need to make sure we get some fungicides out there on most of these varieties, and again, if you're not wanting to spend a lot of money on fungicides, sometimes just that propiconazole or generic tilt application is all you need out there to overcome some of these other diseases. So let's be trying to get a fungicide out there during that boot stage, and I think that'll help you overcome a little bit of this erratic nature of the yield. So, again, that's where we're at, making good progress with harvest in our area right now, and the yield's mostly good. Again, a little bit of an erratic nature in some things, but yield's mostly good, and hopefully we can get this thing wrapped up. We got another hurricane coming in as we tape on October 9th, and hopefully it's just going to skim us and not give us a lot of damage. But anyway, hopefully we can get this crop knocked out in October and be ready for a good winter. So until next time, this has been Randy Kopechka with your Farmer Supply Association Agri Report for October.